Hi, welcome back to Future Fast. And like always, we have a very interesting guest today. And before I bring her into the conversation, I hope you're enjoying Future Fast. And we do appreciate many of you do share your feedback. And thank you so much for those encouraging words. And really appreciate your time and effort you want to give the feedback. And once again, most of you don't subscribe, but you do follow our podcast, you do download. We really appreciate it. But since you are uh, following us, it makes it much easier if you subscribe to it because it'll come on to you because we bring conversation pretty much every week. And with that, once again, thank you and hope you will enjoy this conversation as much as I'm looking forward to. And today we have Dr. Bhakti Devi, and we'll figure out more about her. But to start with, she is the founder of Jal Smruti. Of course, she is based out of Sydney, but Jal Smruti operates in India. And with that, Dr. Bhakti Devi, once again, thank you so much for making time to be with us on Future Fast. Welcome to Future Fast.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having the inviting me.
Well, my pleasure. And so, like always, we start with your journey. So, where does Bhakti Devi's journey start, begin?
Okay. So I guess I will probably talk about the journey of my professional because I've spent 30 years in the water sector. So I might as well stick to my professional story, how it all began. So I'm trained as a civil engineer in Mumbai in BJTI. There's a quite a well-known college, and I also worked briefly in the construction field, and then I didn't like it. And it so happened that at the time, the engineering colleges were really having scarcity of teaching lecturers. So my alumni VJTI reached out to the recent graduates, offering them a teaching opportunity under the condition that we should do masters. It was like the best thing that happened because I was not enjoying my construction management that I was doing on site as a civil engineer. I was not enjoying that job. And I took the opportunity to actually change my career to uh, move from civil to environment because I chose masters in environmental engineering and I loved teaching. So that was a like real pleasurable job. I loved it. So once I worked there in India, in Mumbai, and those days,
Oh, sorry, just
the
one small
yes,
intervention. I
yes,
have
yes,
interacted with a lot of postgraduates in environmental engineering,
uh,
but what I have found
yep,
is that most of them have come from chemical engineering background.
yeah.
So
There are chemical
this is
because
a
that's a yes, yes. Because what happens with the environment, it's a multidisciplinary,
correct,
area. So you will find people with civil engineering, chemical engineering, even science background. They can get
correct.
into, it depends on how strict and restricted the intake is of the
Universities, yeah.
institution. But it is quite multidisciplinary. In fact, in the environmental engineering course, we are introduced to microbiology, chemistry. So all these are very, and little bit of technology as well. So there is a lot of multidisciplinary engagement. So yeah, so
So
that's a
it
good
was
thing.
not that difficult for a civil engineer to get on top
No,
of
no.
it.
In fact,
Okay,
otherwise they wouldn't intake because it always usually environmental engineering sits within a school of civil and environmental because they kind of interconnected because it's all about managing public resources. Civil is a lot of public, structures like transport, bridges, roads. These are come under civil engineering generally, the public structures. So water resource management or how you manage the pollution,
right.
water
And also,
quality.
your civil is also about a lot of material
Yes,
usage and application.
exactly. That's right. So I think for that reason, they kind of club together generally. Civil and environment are often clubbed together. So yeah, I quite enjoyed the shift from civil to environment. And in those days, there was an opportunity where Australia migration, skill migration was very much encouraged and very easy relative to what it is now. So I migrated to Australia in 94. And then it's like it's very interesting when you move to a new country, decide to move. It was, of course, the good thing was they had a support system where they would help you until you get the job, which made it a bit easier. But it was a very good opportunity to explore the world. So the what drove me to come and change the country is that it's an opportunity to explore a new world and expand your own, experiences. So I kind of, because I had come from an academic background, I decided very consciously that I will not go into academia, but I would rather use it as a sabbatical, as if I'm on sabbatical, and explore the industry here, water industry here. And we have to remember that was the time when internet was not very publicly available. So we didn't have internet. The job applications were done by post. We had to write, send our resumes and CVs by typing it up and printing it and posting. And the landlines we would call to find out, where to post. So those were the days. But it was very interesting because it was an opportunity. And I think even though, I was discovering about myself that I kind of had some hustling as inside me. Like I could hustle very easily, and enjoyed hustling, even though I didn't know what I was doing was actually hustling. So the reason I'm saying is because I started by, where do I start? Where do I start looking for a job? There's no internet, nothing except for some newspapers and things like that. So I said I'll start with the yellow pages. So in a big phone directory, at the back there will be yellow pages. So under the yellow pages, there was a section, a small list of companies who did wastewater treatment equipment. So they were listed because they had a package treatment plant, treatment systems they would sell. So I started, calling them, and one of them quite got intrigued about the fact that I've come from India and I'm looking for a job, and I found them through the yellow pages. So he actually said that, look, what you should be really doing is, there's an Australian Water Association. You should, I will send you the directory of the members, and you last year's directory, you can look them up because you'll have a bigger number of companies. Yellow pages is very small. So that was, quite interesting. That in those days, that's when I think that now with all this social media and all, uh, that kind of story doesn't happen, right? It happens in a very different way. But what I'm trying to say, even without social media, people were helping each other in this way. So he posted me the AWA directory, and I was like, wow, this is like a jackpot, because the yellow page had that small list, but this was a whole book, and every company was not only mentioned the name alphabetically, the address, the phone number, and a couple of people from the company, their names were mentioned, and a small paragraph about the company, what the company did. So I was also like learning about the company, and I could call them. I would call them and then say, I'm going to send you my CV. So that was my job initially. I just hustling, and yeah. So basically, I got my break in one of the treatment plant company who used to tender for big treatment plants, some of the parts that would go into the treatment plant. So and then I got worked in
Well,
another
why
company.
why did you why did you
Uh-huh. Yeah,
specifically
yeah.
choose treatment, wastewater treatment? Because
Okay.
water
Because
could have
yes,
been even in the agriculture. First of all, why water? Because
yes,
environmental sciences is
yes,
quite broad.
true.
So
So
why
okay.
water, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
why
yeah. Good
water
question.
treatment?
Absolutely. Because see, what happens is, in environmental engineering, a large proportion of our training is on improving water quality as a pollution. So wastewater treatment, it becomes a big part. Water treatment is also, drinking water treatment is also part of it. But the pollution control becomes the major focus. A very small amount of our curriculum was dedicated to air pollution also. It's not to say not, that wasn't covered, but water was the larger focus, wastewater, right? And so because of that, and I had done my thesis also in a wastewater treatment system. So that became the focus. And also it was easy. First of all, that was my focus, and it was easy to find within the yellow pages, that was, at least there was a dedicated section for that equipment. Basically, I started, but water indeed was the focus of the masters. So very engineering focus. Uh, we were mainly taught about what is the pollution, what exactly do you need to do to remove the pollutants, that kind of thing. So the focus was very engineering, and there's a reason why I'm stressing on this, because as I went down the track of my career, it all changed. My focus changed from engineering to something else. So I worked as an engineer. I would do process design. I would do they would commission a plant. So I would go and conduct the operation and commissioning. So all those, I did that for 2 years in different couple of companies, and then I got bored, because basically it was the same thing repeating. So I was also learning about myself that I like variety, because in an academia you get a lot of variety of work to do. But because I was very curious to try the industry, I learned that if I'm going to work in a company, it's going to be the same thing again and again, and I get bored. So I started looking out, and I said, okay, let me explore the academia, but I was more interested in trying the research part, because that would be more interesting. So they were inviting some applications for developing a treatment process for the odorous emissions that come from the treatment plant. So in a university in Sydney. So I put a proposal, and my proposal was selected, and I got a little grant to basically develop the process. So I quite like the opportunity of working as a research engineer, basically, and doing the experiment, trialing it, and it worked very well. Fortunately, at lab scale, to the point that the university granted a patent for the process I developed. It was a biological process, but getting a patent doesn't mean anything unless you actually have the support of the faculty to commercialize it. And I was not that mature to understand what it takes to commercialize a patented technology. And I got frustrated, because I could see nothing is like, patent means nothing. I knew I needed to test it in the real treatment plant, but I didn't have the know how to go and approach them. And I had no support from internally, unfortunately. So I just got frustrated, and again started looking out for a job. And I found a consultancy position where they were doing this amazing work, because Sydney was going to host Olympics in 2000. So in 1998, I'm talking 98. So in 98, there was this company, and many companies were involved in doing a very large, because the Australian government had very smartly decided that we are going to use this opportunity to make sustainability as the key focus of everything we build for the Olympics, so that sustainability can be promoted and capacity can be built within the public sector. So because of that, they were doing the one of the first model of sustainable water management, which means they were collecting the water from the storm water, sewage, and trying to see that they are recycled to suitable quality to supply for non-potable uses, and drinking quality for drinking purpose. So they were creating this facility called the RAM, Water Reclamation and Management Scheme, and it's one of the first Australia's first water recycling plant. So I got to work on that because it was a huge project, and I also had the opportunity of working on that. So once that job finished, I again started looking out for a job, and I saw this ad where there was a think tank group within a university. It was inviting for engineers, environmental engineers. I had no idea what that think tank group was doing. I was saying, okay, they want an environmental engineer. I'm going to apply. And my CV looked very good because I had just finished working on the Olympic project. So I got the job. So once I got the job, only after I got the job and I started working, I found out what they were really doing was, this is a think tank group, and they call themselves Institute for Sustainable Futures, right? Talking about your future fast podcast name. So it was about, because sustainability is all about keeping your eye on the future, right? And again, because I'm trained as an engineer, I don't know much about this. I did my water recycling plant as an engineer. I did all that. So, but then once I got in, the reason, I mean, what my job was basically, what this think tank group was doing is, because sustainability was a theme that is being pushed by the Australian government, they were building capacity of water utilities, energy utilities, local municipalities, about what does sustainability mean for their business as an entity. What does sustainable water management mean for a water company that sells water, right? Because Sydney Water Corporation, as an example, the largest Australian water utility, they were engaging with them to show them,
Is that
like
a
instead of,
private
of
entity
course, you
or is
they
it a
are
government-run
actually
corporation?
they were no, so it is a government-run corporation because it was incorporated and made it into a corporate, but it reports to government, a state government. So it's state government-owned private entity. So they were basically giving an understanding of what does a sustainable water management would mean for a water utility whose job is to kind of make revenue from selling water, right? So my job there was, and they were doing it evidence-based, so they were doing evidence-based strategy, evidence-based planning, and evidence-based policy. What that means is they would crunch the numbers, show them this is the business case, why you should do this program, or why you should invest in this program, or invest in this plan, or invest in a policy. So it was a proper business case analysis they would do and convince them to invest in that program. So one of my first jobs at in this Institute for Sustainable Futures was I was the analyst on the job basically, right? As an engineer. So my job was what they were doing. The project was there was a project which said to Sydney Water that if you invest your money in going and changing the taps and shower heads of the customers, it will actually make a business case for you. So, so basically, if you reduce the water consumption, if you invest in your customers reducing their water consumption, it actually makes business case for you. And I was quite, intrigued by this. I said, how can that be? Because they sell water, their revenue will be reduced. So how are they going to, how is this a business case? And I was learning on job that how, because I was doing all the number crunching and I had to go and ask them questions. So basically, the whole model was built around what is it revenue? Of course, you'll lose the revenue, but because you invested in it, how much water inflows, how much less water you have to pump to the customers, how much less sewage you have to treat and discharge, and you also account for that avoided cost, how much you therefore defer your planning, whatever dam you may have to upgrade or any pipes you have to upgrade, that gets deferred because your consumption has come down. The amount of pumping you have to do is reduced. So I was
But
fascinated
how
learning
was
on job.
that report accepted? Was it
It
accepted
was
or
so I'll tell you the result of that analysis which I did, and because my job was to also go and ask questions about where are they investing, so I can incorporate that in the analysis and show that this investment won't be needed or how much it will be reduced by. So as a result of that study that we did for them, they ended up investing on an average for 10 years, every year, 60 to 80 million dollars in what we call as demand management program, because it's called demand management because they are trying to reduce the demand of the product they are selling. And why they benefit from it is, or any water utility benefits from it, is because any water utility, it is serving a beast called city. It's a growing beast, it keeps growing. So whatever they have built is never sufficient, because as soon as they've finished building, the city has grown. And now you have to find more water to supply to the city. So it has grown. So this, in order to make sure that they're sustaining their service, if they can manage the demand to keep the demand so that they can keep servicing a growing city, it makes business case for them, right? And if
Bhakti,
you
one
yes,
second.
yes,
I'm
yes.
just curious. See, in India, anywhere in
Yes.
India, right, including Bangalore. We have
Yeah.
a similar company, if you will, called Bangalore
Correct.
Water Sewage
Water.
Supply, Water Supply and
Yes.
Sewage Board.
Supply board.
That's the that's the
Correct.
company, and it is headed by a
Yes.
bureaucrat, typically an Indian Administrative
Correct.
Services
Yes.
professional, or rather a bureaucrat who
Yeah.
runs it, and obviously they keep getting rotated, right? So that's the way it
Yeah.
operates here. So is that run by a bureaucrat there, or is that run by a professional? What is the profile of these people who run such organizations there?
Yeah. Okay. So what happens is Sydney Water, although in '98 they became they were incorporated as a company owned by the state government. However, prior to that, they were exactly like Bangalore Water Sewage and Supply Board. They were called the Sydney Water Sewage and Supply Board, right? Water Supply and Sewerage Board. They were a public entity, very much, so it's all about. Uh, so yeah, what the difference was that as soon as they became a corporate, they were responsible for how they spend their money in exactly the same way as a company would be. So they have to make sure they are capital efficient. They are making good use of their capital in an efficient way, and they're not, the books are not in the red, right? Just like a company would. But as a public entity, sometimes that doesn't happen. That accountability is not sufficient. So it was made into a corporate, so they operate like with the discipline of a company, right? While they're still responsible or answerable to a public entity, they will operate like a discipline of a company. So that's the difference. So here it would be, and they would all this entity will have only 5 years license. They were given license to operate under some conditions, that they cannot keep withdrawing water from the dam as the population grows. They have to keep the limit up to a limit only they can draw water, which was another reason why they needed to do demand management, because it was not like you have all the dam water available to you as the city grows. They were managed. So that is one
Well, I
condition.
think
Like that, there are
situation
many
would be
conditions.
same even in India or any other city, even in Bangalore. But
Yes,
how did they were still the
yes.
bureaucrats who were running even after corporation?
Yeah, it's like some CEO who's got many of them would come from sometimes now there are more corporate background people, but initially they may come from another institution, another organization. So I don't think whether it's a bureaucrat or a corporate that makes a difference. But I guess what makes a difference is how that entity is governed, what kind of rules dictate the entity. So even in the BWSSB case, it's not the bureaucrat how they are and who they are. It is what is accountability, governance accountability of the BWSSB. That's what ends up deciding the fate of how the entity is run. That's my view, because you may have any head leader, but if the governance itself lacks, there's a lot that
Oh,
needs to be
well,
done.
see, it is still a board. Good and bad is
Yes,
debatable, but we've
correct.
seen utilities board become a corporation in here.
Yes.
So it became a corporate, but the
Ah,
administration would still have the bureaucrats running it.
right.
And all these
Yes.
have under ministry, I'm sure even in Sydney, it would still come under water resource
Yes, yes,
ministry or
absolutely.
utilities
The money
ministry and
goes to the
such.
treasury. The treasury makes the earn like all the profits that Sydney Water makes goes to the treasury, and then it gets
Mm,
used in so many different things. So they don't
mm,
directly reinvest in Sydney Water, because Sydney Water has to make a case every 5 years to its regulator that what's the budget they need to run the next 5 year term. So 5 year
mm.
term, if they don't perform well, that license can be given to someone else. So that's the type of discipline and
Someone
regulation they
else
have.
as in a private entity?
Another company can come and say we'll run it for 5 years.
Ah,
So
okay,
that's why
interesting.
there's a bit of a accountability on the management, that they make sure they don't get their license cancelled, or they don't get after the end of the 5 years they do get the license reissued. So that I think is the difference. I don't know. I don't think that kind of regulation exists with the Bangalore water, sewage supply and sewage board. So it's that even in Sydney Water earlier it wasn't like that, but it became a company, and then all these regulations were imposed. So yeah, so I think that was a very award-winning program actually. Demand management program of Sydney Water is given as an example of what water utilities should be doing all over the world. It's one of the best examples amongst few. Many others also have, but Sydney Water has shown the way, and they did a residential demand management program. I was also involved in helping them make the non-residential, what kind of uh, program you can have for reducing the demand for the commercial and the industrial customers, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, so this place, this think tank group, really opened my world from being an engineer who was only working on the treatment systems and thinking I am making a difference. Of course, I'm making a difference, but for me, what was very fascinating was that I, for the first time, understood how who decides and how does it get decided that that engineer will make a treatment plant, because there's a policy somewhere someone has made, there's a plan someone has made, and then only the it gets decided that you need a treatment plant over there. If there is no policy, if there's no plan, that treatment plant doesn't happen, right? So basically I learned how the change gets effected on the ground. If you see change on the ground, it has to happen at the strategy level, at the planning level, right? At the policy level. So that was fascinating for me because, and also what I was discovering about myself is that while I'm trained as an engineer and I can look into details, but I have an aptitude for big picture thinking, because it does require you to take a step back, look at the big picture, and understand what is required, and then drill down and use the on ground information to
and
feed the
and
strategy.
perhaps also a good understanding, exposure to economics of water itself, right? Because that was clearly not part
Yes,
of your previous journey.
absolutely. And this I learned on the job. So as I was doing my analyst role, I was learning about how the economics gets analyzed in order to make a business case. So this was a very wonderful learning ground for me. And I spent 6 years working there and doing a variety of projects for the. We were also doing for the local municipality. See, the municipality, just like the same case in India, also the cities, they don't supply water and they're not responsible for weather. For that, water board is responsible, but the municipality is responsible for storm water, the flooding that happens in the city, to manage the flooding, to manage the stormwater drains. So we were, helping the local municipalities to understand what does it mean to as a municipality, what can they do to create an impact as sustainable water. They can create building rules that you must have codify. They can put codes in the building to say you should have water efficient taps. You must do rainwater harvesting, right? That is in the control of the municipality. That what kind of rules they create for the building, for the future, for the new building. And they can also do harvesting of stormwater, because stormwater is within their control. And in order to, for example, irrigate their parks, they manage a lot of parks, green parks and gardens and golf courses. So how can you create opportunities and tap into opportunities for recycled water, which is possible for a municipality to do. So these were the type of things we were, helping. I was helping the municipality to become aware that this is possible and show them small demonstration projects. So that while I was doing that, then my career took a little turn where because I was looking for a funding for a particular project, sustainable water management project. I got the funding as a PhD scholarship. So they allowed me. They said you can do this if you do this as a PhD. So you'll get a scholarship and you can do this project. So I said, why not? I was not intending to do a PhD, but I said, if I'm getting to do this project as a PhD scholarship, I might as well do my PhD. So that's how I got my, to do my PhD while working on my pet project. Um, so this, so that happened. So once I finished my PhD, uh, then I had to look for my job because my job I had to resign in order to full time PhD. So then I looked for the first job I got was the city of Sydney is a very high profile municipality, because just like you have, greater Bangalore, and Bangalore, as the city
Well,
grows, we
today
all
it
have.
is
So same,
it's called BBMP, Brihad
correct.
Bangalore Metropolitan.
Brihat, exactly. So
Yeah,
the
so it's
translation
now
of Brihat is greater Bangalore.
greater. Correct.
Correct. So same way in Sydney also, it's a greater Sydney is a bigger area, but Sydney CBD, the old Sydney, is the one municipality, and Greater Sydney has got about 30 to 40 urban local bodies. So all the areas in the Greater Sydney are actually managed by urban local bodies. Okay, so this CBD, the oldest part of city, which has got the business district in it, that is called City of Sydney municipality. Okay, so
Mhm.
that mayor of the City of Sydney is a very bold and green minded mayor, and she had just won she got re-elected for the second term on the mandate that she would actually try, and because Australia was coming out of a long drought, 10-year drought, when she got re-elected. So because they were going through the drought, what was happening is the community was frustrated, because in Sydney, what happens is when you have a drought, the way they would manage because the dam levels are going down, so they need to manage how much water people are using. So they would put severe restrictions on irrigating the parks and the gardens and the play fields, sports fields. So it was very much frustrating for the community, because Australia is very sports loving country. They
Mhm.
are very outdoor people. They like physical sports. Everyone engages, the children, the young people. So they were finding that they're not able to use their sports fields, and because there are restrictions on when you can water, how much you can water, and these sports fields were drying out, and they were not, the quality was deteriorating. And they're also very particular about, if the quality of the turf is not good, you get more injuries. So they don't therefore allow sometimes to play if under those conditions. So because of that, there was a lot of impact on the social impact, that people were unhappy with that they can't play, and their games are restricted. So City of Sydney's mayor was her constituent members were saying, why are we depending on Sydney water to water our gardens? Why can't we have our own water? Why can't we create a recycled water and we supply our own water for our parks? So that was the mandate. She said, yes, if you re-elect me, I will give you a recycled water network happening in the city. And I will give you renewable energy network happening in the city. So this was the
Yeah,
mandate.
I have two questions. One
Yes.
is what is the typical term for a mayor there?
It's mayor, Lord Mayor. They I don't know, for some reason, I must say, she's called Lord Mayor. The Sydney mayor is called Lord Mayor. I don't know why, but they still have a
Maybe that's
colonial
the
hang of.
British hangover. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's still Australia is of course still a republic, in the sense that sorry, it's not a republic. It's still a it reports, the governor
correct,
reports to
correct.
the
It's still under
queen,
the
right? So
correct.
they have still that colonial connection.
No, but what is the
Uh,
term for the mayor? How
Mayor,
long?
it's mayor only.
No, no,
Oh,
term as
term
in
for the
how long the duration?
4 years, 4 years.
I think that makes a lot of sense. In Bangalore, unfortunately, it's 1 year.
Oh, 1 year is nothing. We can't do anything.
Yeah,
Before you
yeah,
know it, the 1 year goes. Yeah, that's sad.
correct.
That's
So,
very
and
sad.
second question I have is, what is do you have an idea what kind of a budget this Sydney, Greater Sydney has in terms of?
I wouldn't
Well,
know
I
off the top of
recently
my head, but
learned.
yes.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
approximately what could be the number? I'm just curious. No?
I wouldn't know about the entire budget, no, because I've come back after 7 years, so I'm still catching up.
Okay.
But what I will say this is, because I'm not very, even in spite of being an engineer, my numbers are a little bit, but I must say this, that City of Sydney as a municipality, relative to the other urban local bodies or municipalities, it's very rich municipality. Why? Because it has all the commercial properties. So the every municipality makes its money from the taxes it collects from the properties. So the more the the commercial properties you have, and higher real estate value area, the more tax you may like you earn in revenue, right? So it's one of the richest councils and a very high profile municipality. So in that
Uh,
sense, it's quite well resourced because relative to other, because I used to meet my peers in the other councils, and I used to get a sense that they don't have the kind of money which City of Sydney has. So that was, but the good thing was having a money is one thing, but to have the imagination to put that money to good use is something which Lord Mayor
that
Clover
is
Moore
true.
is
I think
again,
that makes what I
yeah,
learned in Bangalore is supposed to be around 10,000 crores, which is like nearly 1.2 billion US
right,
dollars. So, which is significant
right.
if used
Okay, yes,
properly.
exactly. Because I think in India, the cities, I don't think they're very rich in terms of the tax money revenue they make, right, from the properties. Of course, the fact is that the water bills are not fully recovered. 100% recovery doesn't happen from the water bills, maybe even from the energy bill. So this is always a challenge with many utilities. That the reason they are in a state of very under a lot of what should I say, quite stretched, is because the financial accounting is not very good. Like cost recovery is very poor. But they're trying to make sure that most of the cost is recovered through the getting the bills paid. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But having said that, the tax revenue itself, even if not everyone pays, it must be, especially in all the mega cities, because they are very high valued properties. So yeah, so I kind of got the job. Again, my CV looked very good. I just finished my PhD, submitted my thesis, and I'd done all this work with the think tank group. So it was like the job. I always felt that I was everything had happened for that job, and I was very excited to take the job as a water strategy manager. That was my role at City of Sydney. And so
This is
the
not with
challenge was
Sydney
that
Water, it was with the municipality of Sydney.
city with the municipality and for a water strategy, which was very unique because no municipality is responsible for supplying water of any kind, right?
So, did the
Generally,
job entail
but
you to work with the Sydney Water or was it
no, of
independent?
course, as stakeholders, we will engage with them. And as I tell you my story, I involved Sydney Water because of the what I did. So my job was to basically as a water strategy and it was very interesting because they created the role and they had a very like a one line, two line statement for that role. Now, my role was they had just done a document called Sustainable Sydney 2030, and they had captured many things what the community and the stakeholders want for Sydney to become sustainable, right? Not just water. Water was just one item. And because I had a blank sheet basically when I got into the job, in order for me to understand what is it that I need to do, I took this Sustainable 2030 document and I did Control F, water, okay, to know what was said in the Sustainable Sydney document. And there was only two lines. It said, we want to reduce the, our demand for potable water by 10% by this, the next 5 years or 10 years. So that's it. And also, we want to have a recycled water network uh, implemented in City of Sydney. So those were the two things that were given to me. Basically, that was my brief. So it was up to me then how to make that vision happen. And it was like I had a mixed feeling. I was quite excited that, here I was, previously I was only showing the municipalities demonstration project here and there. And this municipality wants to do everything that is possible within decentralized water within a city, right? So that was quite while it's being exciting, but it was also very nerve wracking because it was like everything rested on me. Whatever I said will go, which means if I made a mistake, then that's also would be a problem. So yeah, so that was a very interesting journey because and I managed to do some very, I mean, even I was surprised at the extraordinary things that I was able to do. And it was credit to, of course, my passion and my experience was one, but it couldn't have happened without that visionary leadership and a very great organization culture, which was put a lot of faith in me, gave me, like gave me the freedom and support in terms of whatever ideas I would have, I would get the support for it from the staff. So I was able to engage with the staff and get them on board. And they were also very, very agile, quite an agile for a municipality. So that, because of that, we got a lot of results in a very short time, very visible results. Good programs started happening. I've invited, like we did build partnership with Sydney Water to create a new program for, creating water demand management for the businesses. So that was just the beginning. And after that, we did many other very groundbreaking programs. And one of the big groundbreaking one was creating a master plan for what all is possible to do within City of Sydney, even though not all projects is something City of Sydney can do themselves. But City of Sydney was saying that we will partner with the other stakeholders to make this happen. And that has really created a lot of projects since I left City of Sydney. It's 2013 is when I left City of Sydney, and I left because Sydney Water by then had got kind of inspired by what City of Sydney was doing, and they said we will also do decentralized innovation, although that was not something within their mandate, but they felt as a water entity they should. Uh, and they did that. So once they introduced that as their new strategy, and when they invited, they kind of put a call out for a strategist, I felt tempted that I should go and work for Sydney Water because I thought City of Sydney, I have helped them and I've built the capacity. So after a strategy is done, it's mostly execution, which the other teams are doing. So I felt, why not try Sydney Water? Why not give it a shot in helping Sydney Water do something innovative? So once I joined Sydney Water, the experience was quite a contrast, uh, to put it mildly, because it was the difference of the organization culture that City of Sydney very community focused, very community connected, whereas Sydney Water is heavily regulated. Because of the regulation, they have always been regulated. So because of that, there is a culture of keeping your profile, calling community customers because they pay money to buy your water. So they're not community, they're customers. And also, you don't want to do too much, too innovative, too radical. Just keep doing what just you require to do so that you're not rocking the boat. You don't want to be seen. If you're not in the news, that's a good thing. That means you've not done anything wrong. Only when you do something wrong, you come in the news, right? So that was the culture. It was very interesting for me to really appreciate what I had in City of Sydney. And also, when I was engaging with because my job was to help the asset managers and engineers to really think about how do you think about long-term um, strategy, because the regulator of Sydney Water, when they put the 5-year budget, they asked them, where is your long-term strategy? This is your 5-year budget, but then it's very big, because what happens in a city typically with a water utility, that the infrastructure is becoming very old because the city is growing, and the old infrastructure suddenly comes for repairs and replacements, right? So suddenly you have a big peak in your budget, but then the
So you have
regulator
to
asks, so
capture
what's your
maintenance
strategy?
and
Exactly. But then it has also happens in a very big, like suddenly a lot of assets are coming for replacement because of the age, right? So now, and that's a big money. Are you going to replace like with like? This was done 100 years ago. Is that what you're going to do? Same thing again? What's your strategy? No, they didn't know how to answer that question. And so my first job was to create a framework for how does a water utility think even about a strategy which is only used to thinking 5-year asset planning. Like it's all about, the budget is all about repairs and renewals. You just, what are the pumps, pipes? You make a list. These are to be replaced, and that's my budget. That's my planning. right? Very operational focus. But then strategy is more about looking forward. So one of my first challenges, I have to create the strategy framework and engage the asset managers and engineers in building that strategy, because I'm a facilitator, because the data sits with all of them. And the Sydney Water is huge. They have treatment plants, they have networks, drinking water supply networks, sewer networks, sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants, assets of a very diverse portfolio, correct? And every set of asset is managed by different groups. There is a group which does only planning, and there's a group that does only operation maintenance, there's a group that only does design. All are in silos, understandably, because it's a very focused job. Now, how do you engage them in a way that, first of all, they understand that we need a strategy, because they need to be convinced we need a strategy? Because for people who are in the middle management, they don't care. The regulator has asked you to do a strategy, therefore I should do a strategy. They want to understand, why do we need a strategy, and what is the strategy anyway? What's a 30-year strategy? That's what they wanted. So it was very interesting, because I would go and sit and have a conversation with these asset managers and one on one, just to do my pitch. That, and they're very intelligent, capable engineers, because they have worked very sharp, because they've worked in this utility sector for so long. So they're not, their questions are valid. Their questions are very important. So I would really keen to hear their questions, or their pushbacks. So I would sit with them and try and make a pitch that, oh, you need a strategy because, and then the future is, but the future, like, how do you predict that what's going to, like, are you going to, how are you going to say what exactly will happen in 30 years? And don't we already do 30 years? Because we have, what they used to do was growth plan. Like, population is growing like a straight line. So we have a plan. We do have a 30-year plan, because 30-year we know the population, and therefore for that population, what we need, we know. What else do you want to do? What is different with what you are what a strategy is, and what a 30-year growth plan is? So I used to struggle, and I went back and forth. I used to fine tune my pitch about why you need it, how you need it. So then slowly, as I used to keep working on my pitch, till I got. So once, when I was talking to one of the engineers, I said, look, think about this 30-year strategy as a due diligence on your 5-year budget. And when I said this, there was no pushback. So I had to think, what did I say? That I didn't get a pushback. So I went through it again. I said that it's a due diligence on your 5-year budget. So what I understood is that, because they understand the risk language better, so the due diligence on 5-year budget made much more sense to them than saying that we need to look at the future and, right? So this is just the
it's
way
about how right or wrong for the next 5-year projections.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're engineers, they want to be precise, and that doesn't cut with them. That argument doesn't cut. But what cut with them is a risk lens on your 5-year budget. What if your 5-year budget is wrong? How are you going to know that what you proposed for the 5 years is what you need and not something else? So that's the way of doing a due diligence, by looking, crystal gazing future, and looking at this with that future in mind, and saying, do we have to spend it all, or maybe we should do it in small modular, right? So that became very easy then for me to talk to others. Everyone kind of slowly got on board. But yeah, so that was a very interesting exercise. But I also was able to create a framework in a way which engaged the different siloed departments, brought them on a same page, so that I understood. For me, I was actually doing so that I understood what's going on, but it was also helping others to come on the same page. And that was a very interesting, and challenging exercise, but very satisfying for me, because it really started to create a bit. Yes.
Well, I'm just curious
Yeah,
about
go
the
ahead.
framework. If you have that framework for how do
Okay.
you plan for next 30 years of
Yes,
water demand,
sure.
right? For
Yes.
any city. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something you could have you published it, or is something you could put it out?
So
If he could probably
Yeah,
put it out as a link in this podcast. And I'm just
sure. I have not because it often becomes a like a organizational thing. But I can tell you what just the principle that I
okay.
used for this. So it was basically using scenario planning as a framework, and then making sure that you have you the way the framework would work is you look at what we call as the high priority, high low priority, and what is short term, long term, and you start mapping your projects based on the short term nature, the urgency of it, and then look at risk and opportunities. So you make sure you're identifying what I called as strategic risk. So strategic risk for different scenarios. So you look at a scenario where what if climate change brings, a lot of heat, and because of that heat, we, have what could be the impact? First of all, understanding that scenario itself and building a narrative about that scenario in a way that makes sense for what's the utility, right? So what does it mean? And I was getting them to contribute to that narrative because they understand the infrastructure better. But my job was to facilitate that. So once we built the narrative, then what does this narrative say that, in terms of what could, if that became real, what would then be the solutions that would be required if that became real? And then you backcast and say, okay, if for that scenario, does this today's investment, which of these investments could become redundant, will become meaningless, right? So then they started appreciating that means we need to be more flexible in what we are investing in the short term. So that we so then scenario two, scenario three. So you created these four different scenarios. One could be from a climate change perspective, another could be from a what if a new technology has come that can solve some problem, right? What would that look like? So once you've created these various scenarios, you are now able to, it's almost like an experiment, thought experiment you're running. And you're able to then look at your current budget and look at it and change it and understand that how much room we need to. It's more about appreciating that it is an opportunity. This budget is an opportunity that you leave room for any course correction rather than lock it. Because why? Because all the budget is, yeah, just one last sentence, because
Yeah.
it's going to lock something in for next 50 years.
Mm.
That is why you have to look at it with due diligence.
Right.
Yeah, please go
Uh,
ahead.
was part of your consideration included, or how much of it included, of, political impact, right? The impact of the political policy making, which is not
Yes,
necessarily logical or
yes,
scientific.
sure.
So, how much weightage did you have for that?
Okay, so now the good thing about Sydney Water being a corporate, that it doesn't really get impacted by politics, except
Wow. Okay.
maybe the politics can influence the regulator. But we are the entity is answerable to the regulator. So there are rules that are kind of set already in place, and it is those rules it has to follow. And also I must say the other reason why politicians didn't meddle too much with Sydney Water like entity is because it's a cash cow. It makes a lot of money, so they won't bother it unless it's like a cost item. Nobody was, at least that was my experience, that it's not generally compared to many other departments the way they would be meddled with by politicians, or if by change of government things can change. When the government has changed, suddenly some particular department will be completely abolished. So that type of thing wouldn't happen to, it was kind of politically immune in that way.
Okay. Okay. Well,
That was
the question
my
was in the context. See, in India, suddenly now it's an election year. You're probably familiar. So,
yes,
but last few years, few state governments started giving some free sops. Now the free
right,
sop debate has gone to a national level,
yeah,
where there are
I
political
know.
parties proposing to give 100,000 rupees every month to
Yes,
a
that's
woman,
very
to, I
sad.
mean, all kinds of things are happening, and
I know.
there are
It's crazy.
subsidized, discounted electricity bill,
Yes,
free public transport.
yes,
I mean, you just,
yes.
so, how does a corporate, with what the next government is going to come
Absolutely.
up and blow through the
Yeah,
roof? So
yeah.
that's where I was curious. How
Actually,
did you capture that?
exactly. So basically, as I said, that kind of problem, at least the water utility in Sydney is not facing. So that's why now it's a good segue to, like, then I kind of made a decision while working in Sydney Water after this particular project. There was no other project that was, actually coming. They were whatever the innovation strategy they were going to build, that actually did not happen. So became a little frustrated, and I just kept got a strong calling that I should go to India and do something in water. So that calling I could not ignore, because but the problem was I had a job. It was a permanent job. I still had the job. How do you then convince yourself to leave this and do that, right? So I found a way where I actually, um, came to India 2 weeks just to look that maybe if I meet someone, I can get a short project. And that led me to a small project in for 2 month assignment, so that I can get a feel for, and maybe whatever I'm feeling, that calling I'm feeling to come to India, maybe it's a passing phase. I was testing myself that, is it real, or why am I feeling so strongly? So I came for the 2 month assignment and I quite liked it. The NGO offered me a proper job, but then I took a 1 year leave without pay from my job, again because I wasn't sure that maybe it's a passing phase. What if the fever comes down and then I'm stuck? So I was being very diligent about it. So I took a year leave without pay, and I took that job which the NGO gave me. And the so my what I was going to say before I say what happened in India is that what made me come to India, despite the fact that in India the situation is quite hopeless, to be honest, when it comes to water and the government owned water, utility, because it's a chaotic place. It's a very almost hopeless. That's what I call it, because of many things. But what gave me the hope? Not because I was going to engage with the government. What gave me the hope is this whole concept of decentralized water. Because while being in Sydney Water, I was also learning that there is so much downside to a large system, which is the centralized system. Centralized system is something which you bring water from a remote distance, then supply it to a large city, and you take the sewage to another remote distance and treat it, right? So what, and every up to a point it is efficient, and that's why the system came into being. But after a point, it becomes unwieldy. It becomes very difficult to manage. It creates more problems than it solves, which people don't know about. For example, there's a huge odor and corrosion budget every water utility in Australia has. Why? Because sewage that sits there in the pipes, when you have a long sewer pipe, they're all spending too much time in the pipes, that the pipes get corroded, right? There is also a lot of losses happen. You can't control these losses, because however good you may be managing, the old pipes will give way, and they are already, city has built over it. How do you go and change those pipes, right? So these are the issues I was seeing firsthand, and I drew a conclusion, because I worked in both municipality, creating a decentralized system, and a full on water utility. What I learned is water utilities don't have the capacity to do innovation. It's not their fault. It's the way the legacy is. They have been a monopoly, and it's all over the world. All over the world, same story of water utilities. They've been a monopoly. They've only done always the same thing as they started, piped system. That's it. They don't know to do anything else. And thirdly, it's only one discipline, only engineers. That's it. So monodiscipline means like you don't have the diversity of thinking. You're missing out on diversity. You're also missing out on gender diversity. all men mostly, right? So you got all these three, four things stacked against innovation. You can't expect innovation from any water utility in the world, mostly. That's my thing. So then, where is the innovation in water going to happen? Innovation in water will happen at the community level. Because why? Because decentralized water is all about managing water, community managing its own water within their own property, because it's possible, because there is technology now, and because it's become very affordable now to do that. It's not expensive. It is not, technically, it's technically proven. So that's the future, which of course the utilities will never admit, because they have a job to do to keep the system going, right? But with India, I felt there's more scope for community based water systems. Why? Because there is no legacy infrastructure. We don't have sewage infrastructure provided to many buildings, which is a good thing, which means that already the community is on its own in Bangalore, correct? They're supplying their own water, they're managing their own sewage. But what is
Only
missing?
gated communities, but broadly the
Yeah,
city and municipality takes care. Yeah.
yes, but then do you know that how much of the water supply actually they're able to get from city? Why do they need to drill
Hmm.
bore wells? Why are they buying tanker waters? Because the water supply is thinning. As the
Right.
population grows, the slice that each household gets, each
Correct.
property gets, is growing smaller and smaller, right?
Well,
There's no way
also
they're not.
unfortunately, Bangalore has always had a river. I mean, historically, every city has
Yes,
had a river, right? It
yeah,
goes by the river, and Bangalore's river was, uh, uh, I can say, pretty much killed by British because Bangalore was a colony of British, and
yes,
they didn't care to sustain the river in around Bangalore, which I think even they did it back in Thames was also near death, right?
yeah,
Around 902-4 is when they started reviving Thames. Otherwise, it was near dead. So they did it to their
mm,
own river. So they did it as much to Bangalore's river also. But unfortunate thing is that in Bangalore, in Britain, the people woke up. In India,
yes,
after even British left post independence,
yes,
the same what do you call the same attitude towards Bangalore's river was sustained by our own people who became our
yes,
leaders, politicians
sure,
who
yes,
ruled, administered the state, and they never bothered about reviving the river. They continue to kill it
yes,
further on and continue to
correct.
kill our
Yes,
water body. So it's a
that,
uh,
of course,
that's
because
why
as
the
you're
water
right in
tanks
pointing,
are required today.
yes,
Tankers are required today.
correct, because there was, you're right that in fact India's history, pre-British history, is all about decentralized community managing their water, creating the water tanks, water harvesting structures, and managing it on their own. And kings were only patrons; they would only kind of support, but everything was
Correct.
managed by people.
Correct.
But the British came and changed the rule from
They changed
bottom
it to
up to,
centralized system,
yes,
and
exactly,
unfortunately, the independent India sustained the
yes.
centralized system,
They continued,
and
yes,
they continue to kill the decentralized system, which thrived
correct.
in cities like Bangalore.
Right, right. No, absolutely. So what I'm saying is that was my optimism that I'm not dealing with government. I'm going to deal with community, which is much better and easier than,
How was your response? I mean, how was response to your efforts? What is it? 7 years since you got started in India,
yeah, yeah. So when I came in 2017, I was just experimenting first year as a job with the
right?
NGO.
Right.
And within that first year, within 6 months, I learned one thing, which I took a lesson. I should not be working in an NGO. If I have my own vision, I have to take the entrepreneurial route. I cannot, because they were only doing work that the aid was given to them, grants. Wherever the grant was required to spend money, a German grant or an American grant or a Swiss grant, and they dictated what they should do. And most of these grants, they actually make you sit in front of the government. They say you need to only work with government, because one of the aim is to promote themselves, right? And my my aim was opposite, not to work with the government. So it was complete in conflict. So I could quickly, in 6 months, I learned no, I cannot do this while working in an NGO. I have to, so I resigned my job and stayed in Bangalore because I still have 6 more months before I decide to go back or stay back here, right? So during that 6 months, I started creating my own network. I started reaching out to solution providers. I started with there because there are a lot of incubators, accelerators. So I started making networking with the people who are providing these solutions, which make my vision of decentralized water happen. Once I got confidence that we have solutions in India and they are affordable, then I got the confidence to reach out to the community. Because I can't reach to the community without knowing there are no solutions, right? So once I know the solutions, I'll get very confident. But now I'm not working in an NGO. I don't have a business. I don't have an NGO. How do I introduce myself to the community? Because I want to go and study their property, right? So I came up with an idea that I created a website and I called the website Urban Water Doctor so that I have an identity. So I can introduce myself, right? That I am Bhakti Devi from Urban Water Doctor. And I would give them the website so they can go and check out who I am and what I do and all. So at least I like doors started opening because you have to have a introduction when I don't know anybody, right? So that was very helpful. And I used to get a lot of people inviting me to go and study the properties, which was very good because I felt I was blessed to be in Bangalore because it allowed me to study. Because in order for me, I needed to study it before I know what the solution is. So I kind of talked to people, all the committee members, how they make, what are their challenges, gone and looked at many buildings, commercial buildings, residential buildings. And, so I was first learning how do I make sense of a building and how do I quantify the problem for the community? Because the problem statement I figured was not technology, because technical solutions are there, not financial, it's financially affordable. The problem is more a social. How do you get a community to understand what the problem is, how serious the problem is for their building, not in the city, about their own building, and what do they need to do and how much will it cost? If they can understand that as a shared understanding, that everyone understands the same thing in a neutral way, not by, because when a salesperson comes, of course they are also telling them, but they have something to sell. I don't have anything to sell. If I can offer them as a solution for this problem, that people to get confident about what they understand their own problem and understand what the solutions are and what would it take to make the solutions implement. So I offered them neutral solution. Like, I'm not having anything to sell. I'm a doctor. I'm diagnosing your building and giving you a report card, a scorecard. So I was giving them a water scorecard and a water positive action plan. Now they decide. The action plan is customized to their building and it's made up of number of solutions. And it also tells them how much will it cost. Now they can sit together and decide, let's do this solution this year, this solution next year, whatever, or not do the solution. I also, in the scorecard, I also gave them what will be the risk of not doing anything. So they are clear that even if they don't decide, if they decide not to do, they know what they are in for. So that became my thing to offer to buildings. And, I started getting traction in that 6 months, small traction. And I got the confidence that, yes, I want to stay here. And I resigned the job. Because, of course, I was not making money. It was still like a pre-revenue. But I just enjoyed the whole
So
process.
you saw
Uh,
that there is something that you can do and you
yeah,
can actually solve some
and
problem.
to be exactly, and to be honest, the thought of going back was very depressing to me. So I felt I want to stay and continue. And I kind of convinced myself, and or should I say, I gave myself permission to, because I was saying, how long will it take for me to become, revenue? I said, I don't know. It's I don't have no idea. It could take a long time, but one thing I was confident about is that I know to pivot. I can pivot as many times. So even if I pivoted the whole life, in trying to solve this problem, I'll die a happy woman. And that became my last thing to say, okay, that's it. Now you have the permission to go and do what you want. Because if you feel, because one thing I did develop with that 1 year staying in Bangalore is I had got a good idea of how much would it take to live in Bangalore, in India, like cost of living, right? I was not shooting in the dark. So I also had enough network to feel that I think I don't want to do a job because I know what happens when I do a job. I will only take small gigs just to enough to pay my rent, but I can keep doing what I want to do and explore, right? So that confidence I got because that 1 year leave without pay gave me that confidence because it allowed me to explore freely. Because if I was sitting there and deciding that I want to come and work here, that wouldn't be right. But now I was doing it based on some proper evidence, my own experience, my own like gut feeling that what I want to do and what I can do. So that was very, very valuable. That's my, I owe a lot to Sydney Water for that opportunity that I got to, because it's a very amazing thing for an organization to allow their employee to go away and take 1 year off and explore something and come back if they want to, or resign if they want to. So
Well,
that is,
one
how I kind of,
one other thing. I mean, not
yes,
specific to
yes,
what you're doing at Jal
yep,
Smruti, but so you moved to Australia as an immigrant and stayed put. Even acquired uh, uh, professional status and career
experience,
experience.
yes.
And so, what is that impact of Australia and as an immigrant to Australia on your identity of
Yeah.
Bhakti Devi? So, what is that?
Oh, I think what Australia gave me is the opportunity to basically, as I said, you come here as an immigrant and it's a blank sheet. You can do whatever you want. Some of them, as I said, I chose very carefully not to go into IT because at the time when I migrated in the 90s, there was a trend that every engineer who came, whether he's a civil engineer or she's a civil engineer or mechanical engineer, any engineer, they would straight go into software engineering. They would take a master's because it was free. They didn't have to pay any fee. They can do masters and get a job as IT professional because IT was booming at the time. And many civil engineers became IT professionals. But I just felt IT professional was not for me. So people had the freedom to choose whatever they wanted to do. That is Australia gave these migrants the it's because people there is a job opportunity. There's opportunity for you to study as a migrant. They allow you, they give you full facility to study. So that's amazing, right? So and but I chose, oh no, I want to just explore jobs. I managed to do that also. So that is, I guess, is the contribution, and that whole identity of me as a water professional would not have happened, if the and also the other thing I must say about the Australian culture is that when I was as a new person, brand new person, very gawky, I was not even very comfortable wearing Western clothes, and in those days we never even thought why not just go in Indian clothes, Indian outfit to meet a prospect employer, right? We used to think we have to dress exactly like them because that's the norm. And I was very uncomfortable, very, very conscious, and I would go and meet these people, and they would make you sit because I was cold calling. I was cold calling many companies with the directly. And you won't believe what they would do is they said, okay, you can come at this time on this day. And I would go there with my CV, and someone senior from the company will come, will make me sit down, will give me the whole thing about their company. They'll tell me how, when the company was founded, how many people work there, what are the type of jobs they do. They they will treat you with so much respect. They value, like I felt valued by the way they treated you, even though you're just a job person looking for a job. Why would you make the person sit and talk? But that's the culture of Australia. That they really treat everyone with full seriousness and respect. And that was like, it really impacted me. It
Is
inspired
it
me
still
that
same since how long now that you immigrated to?
it,
25, 27
it
years?
Yeah, 30 years now, 30 years.
30 years. So, how different is it now? Is it still the same?
Still the same, still the same. And it is, at least my experience has been the same. Uh, I know that there were some in between, something happened with the Indian student community, and that kind of created a lot of this. But I don't think that there was more to it than what was reported. So, but yeah, but I think it's a very fair dinkum. They call it fair dinkum. Very fair chance they'll give to everyone. They will not, and yes, what you may also hear about is some prejudices, which is very, do you think in India we also have prejudice? I used to work as a South Indian working in Maharashtra in an engineering college. They would insist that if I don't speak Marathi, then I'm not with them. It happens, right? Like they want you to be like them before they accept you. So that kind of human prejudices you'll find here and there, but it's not like a everywhere. It's not a rampant thing. So that's what I would say, is that it is quite a good fair culture. Yes, there is also unconscious bias. I wouldn't deny that. It's not picture perfect. There are unconscious biases which you experience as you rise, in your experience and in your thing. And but yeah, that's, I guess, that is all pervading. It's not only limited to Australia. So, but yes, but they have some very good cultural things which allows anybody to thrive, to bring out their potential. And the confidence I got was to come and work in India like this, like, after staying away for so long. That confidence is built from the work and the interaction and the feedback the community, the professional community has given me. Otherwise, where will I get the confidence from? Right? So that is,
Lastly,
I owe it to.
well, another thing is, I've been also fortunate to have some Australians as guests on my podcast,
Ah,
and also I have a few
right.
Australian friends, and the
Uh-huh.
Australians have a very distinct accent. Uh,
Yes, they
and
do.
how did you manage to lose it for this conversation, or was it that frequent travel to India has
Yes.
taken it out, and you've
No, I
become
must
a
say one thing.
neutral Indian accent, if I can say that?
Yes, yes. So basically, when I was new to Australia, I used to be fascinated by their, very heavy accent. It was sometimes hard to even understand in the beginning, right? But of course, over time, you learn it. And when I came back 7 years later, it's like it's all over again, like new thing to me. Some of like many, they use also very typical terms and phrases, which are very, what should I say, humorous, practical. They have a way of saying something, and I had kind of forgotten because I stayed away, and now like everything came back. So it's quite, it is very different, but at the same time, I find it very endearing. Those accents, any accent for that matter. When someone speaks with a different accent in Hindi, also I find it quite endearing.
So,
So,
Bhakti, what kind of books or podcasts are you into? Maybe, or if you want to make some recommendations here to our audiences.
well, I must say I am quite busy to actually take time to regularly listen to any podcast. But I do watch, occasionally some podcasts and things, and I'm more into podcasts which are talking about my own field of, there are some people who are thinking, because there is a whole new water paradigm in our water sector, which is what I am kind of very much wedded to, and that is the type of paradigm shift thinking I try to promote in my work, and I want it to be reflected in the work we do as an NGO. And so I try to follow the people who are really putting out material, because it's a very small group of community who is making a difference in giving the voice to the new water paradigm. So my mostly I'm regularly listening to those conversations and podcasts. And of course, I'm also very interested in, that your topic is very, I found it very interesting, I must say, future, because it's very important, because as you can see, my whole life has been about thinking long term. sustainability, long-term strategy, right? So it is very important to, because not all of us may be able to even imagine the future, because we may not be experts in technology, expert in a certain field. And the best way to understand what the future could be is to really talk to people who are thinking in that space, right? And that is really helps you to open your mind to what's in store in the future, and just examine what we are doing right now. Are there any new skills we need to learn? Are there any
Right.
new things we need to prepare ourselves for? So these topics do definitely interest me and intrigue me. Future, and anything that new way of economic.
Any
Even I try to,
recommendations?
for Water Stories is a very good channel, a YouTube channel, which I'll recommend, which is a community of all people who are thinking in this new water paradigm. It's a new way of thinking on water, which is very much
Where is that from?
needed, urgent. It is it's a very global community
Okay.
YouTube channel. It's called Water Stories. You can look up Water Stories, and
Right.
that's one. So yeah, so there is also, if you uh, Google, and also the new way of economics, because right now I feel it's actually a very interesting time where all the old systems are kind of breaking down, because they're reaching their limits. They've reached their limits, and all the breakdowns are showing that are revealing the faults and the limitations of the system we thought will exist forever. An economic system is one of them, which is a fundamental system that runs our world. So that has really broken down now. It's a matter of time that we will have to make a shift. So unless things completely break down, new things don't emerge. So for me, while everything is breaking down, I'm seeing opportunity for new things to emerge. Because today, the way we are able to understand and appreciate the fallacy with the current system is so much more than what could appreciate 10 years ago, much before COVID. If you
Hmm.
spoke about the problems with the current economic thinking, the mindset, people wouldn't understand it, appreciate it. But now people are able to understand even the environmental impacts, the way
Hmm.
what our own human contribution, we are able to appreciate it now more than before. So it's really a good time where we are able to talk about new ideas, new models, new ways of thinking. And in fact, when I say new, to be honest, when it comes to water, it is all about going back to nature. That is like, it's not about going forward in some technology way. It's about going back to basics, learning from the nature. That is the future. That people have begin to appreciate that that is what you need, that we need to really tune into nature and not do anything against it, but work with it. So that's, and the wisdom is there for us to take.
Correct.
When we ignore it, we deprive ourselves of and create some shonky system which fail. So that's the learning from what we did. And as humans, collectively, we are allowed to make mistakes, right? But what is important is if we can take the opportunity to learn and make a new system, redesign system. That's what we really need for the future. So
Wonderful. So true, and that's
yes,
Bhakti Devi, Dr. Bhakti Devi, and do share this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, listening
yes,
to and
I did.
conversing with. So
Yes,
please do share this conversation and do come back soon, because we are going to have a conversation with her about what does she do with Jal Smruti, and also what I'm
yes,
more excited about is uh, to get her perspective in what the future of water security is going to be, what things are happening, and what could happen, and what should happen from her perspective. So please do come
yes.
back, and till then, enjoy the ride. And once again, Bhakti, thank you so much for sharing this
Thank
journey.
you. Thank you.
Amazing. It just flowed like
Yes.
water. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We'll come back. Thanks.